This too shall pass. Hey, I am Chuck the Bureaucrat, and today I'm going to tell you a story about something that researchers observed back in the 1970s. It's something that has an implication for your military career, your retirement, and honestly, probably just about every phase of your life. And just to give you a sense of the punchline, human beings have a hard time interpreting variation in a normal process. All right, to get started, back in 1973, two researchers, Kahneman and Amos Tversky, published a paper called On the Psychology of Prediction. My summary on this paper is that they basically did a bunch of experiments where they gave well-adjusted, educated people information about something and then watched how those people interpreted that information. What they found was that in many cases, the test subjects were unable to interpret the meaning contained in the information. In one example, they described an experience that Tversky had when he was a young man. Essentially, he was working with Israeli Air Force instructor pilots, and he was advocating that they apply a positive reinforcement approach to students. That is, when students did well in performing a particular flight maneuver, the instructors should praise them. And when students didn't do well, the instructor pilots should avoid overly harsh critiques. What was interesting was that after some experience applying this positive reinforcement approach, the instructor pilots started to become very frustrated with it. They noticed that, contrary to the expectations of psychological theory, that when they offered praise to a student who had done well executing a maneuver, that same student would often perform more poorly the next time they did the same maneuver. As a result, the instructor pilots concluded that positive reinforcement was an ineffective tool for training student pilots. And what's more, and frankly I think most interesting about this, is that the young researcher who had proposed the positive reinforcement strategy in the first place, he began to question the efficacy of the technique. Now, real quick, let's pull back the curtain on why the instructor pilots perceived this phenomenon the way they did. You see, independent of any instruction or praise or butt chewing, a student pilot can be expected to have a degree of variation in how they perform their tasks. Some days they're going to perform better than they normally do, and some days they're going to perform worse than they normally do. And what's more, if a student does have a good day, there is a high probability that the next time they perform the task, they won't perform to such a high standard. And by the same token, if they go out and have a lousy performance, well, the odds are that the next time they try it, just by dumb luck, they're going to do better. But this was the reason why the instructors believed that a negative counseling over a poor performance was the best way to increase student pilot performance. To them, it seemed like a good old-fashioned butt-chewing almost always was followed by increased performance. Well, congratulations and a pat on the back for a job well done. Well, it was almost guaranteed that performance was going to slip. But so what? I mean, why would I even bother telling this story? Well, I would argue that there are a number of ways that this perceptual bias interferes with our ability to perceive what's really going on and to perceive it in a positive light. And just to share a little bit more information than you probably want to see, I'm going to explain this by showing you my YouTube channel's performance as measured by viewers. Back in March, I figured I was having a good day if I got more than 1,000 views in a single day. But then, in April, I posted a couple of videos that caught the attention of the YouTube algorithm, and I suddenly experienced an uptick in my number of views. Now, that might be exciting, but it's also helpful to remember the story of those Israeli pilots. That is, that when views suddenly go up, the odds are they're going to come down. And so through most of the month of May, you can see that there was a return towards more normal performance. But I want you to notice how views in May, even though they were not as good as views in April, they're better than they were in March. And trust me, they are a lot better than February or January. And so, in general, you have to be careful that you don't beat yourself up too much when a sudden increase in performance starts to return to normal. And by the same token, maybe you got to be a little bit careful about congratulating yourself when that uptick happens in the first place. But there is an even more important message here for those of you who are in the military or still have a strong military mindset. Even if you have the presence of mind to recognize that this too shall pass, or that which goes up must come down, even if you have that degree of mindfulness, well, the people around you, particularly your rater and senior rater, well, they're likely to be more like those Israeli instructor pilots. They are going to see negative counseling as a highly effective technique for increasing performance, and so you are going to experience some negative counseling. And then you are going to have to be able to soldier through with the knowledge that what's really going on is just normal performance variation. The other point is that you are going to run into this bias almost everywhere you go. Every time that you make a transition, whether you're showing up for your first assignment or your fifth or you're transitioning out, you are going to experience ups and downs. And there's that inevitable quality that whenever you experience an up, it's probably going to be followed by a down. The good news is, when you're down, guess what? It's probably going to be followed by an up. This certainly has been true in my own personal military transition, and it shows up a lot in the stories that people share with me. And if you want to see an example of where sort of a routine military behavior appears to cause problems in civilian interviews for some folks, watch this video.